Hello students, welcome back to the second part of qualitative methods. These PowerPoint slides are available on the website, or you can also contact me and I'll be happy to share them. And several of the students, like Emmanuel, will also be glad to share them with you. And Dr. Gray will be back from his wedding, and we want to say congratulations to him on his marriage. We wish we could have been there, so please give him your excitement and let him know we are saying hello. We wanted to go ahead and present a little bit of suggestions on ethnographic interviewing guidelines. And these are really pulled already from a source, and they're pretty well explanatory, but let's go ahead and just review them for those of you who maybe have not interviewed much. First, please make sure that you obtain informed consent before interviewing. And you really do need to do an IRB. And you need to talk to Mr. Gray about this. This is a first course, so really we're not going to go into much detail. But if you're doing an academic study or a professional study, the government of Liberia and many countries around the world really want to make sure you do the ethically appropriate thing of submitting your questions and your design for your research before you actually do it. And then two, you have to actually inform the participants of what you're studying, what are the intentions of the study, and that they have the right to say no or to agree to be a part of the study. And you need to tell them what information they give, including their name, age, or any personal information, if that will be used. I highly recommend you try to stay away from using personal information or even collecting it. For example, in my own study for my PhD, I never at any time wrote down or had my team collect the names of anyone who we interviewed. We also did not collect any personal information such as identification numbers, voter registration information, dates of birth, and we also didn't even write down the addresses where they lived. So, first, obtain informed consent. Two, do not look for the desired answer. Make sure that when you ask a question, you're asking it in such a way that the person doesn't really know what you're hoping for as an answer. For example, I could ask Alexis, do you like my class? This is leading. It would be better if I asked, what are your opinions on the class you are taking? I like it. Or she could have easily more said, I dislike it. But also notice the intonation of which I ask a question. If I say, what do you like about my class? Of course, it's very obvious I'm looking for something good for her to say. Or I could say things like this accidentally. What do you like about my class? Notice my face, the intonation of the question. She's probably already thinking, I'm assuming she doesn't like the class or that there are things wrong with it, or I have doubts. So make sure to have a very neutral voice. Ask the question in a way that doesn't give your participant any hint of what you're actually looking for. Of course, when I ask, what are you gaining from the class, I'm hoping she'll say something positive, but she may actually in turn say, I'm not really gaining much. As a good researcher, I have to be open to that. Three, pre-test your questions to make sure they are understandable and culturally relevant. Me and Alexis obviously are not from Liberia. However, when we did our research in Liberia, we wrote our questions in tandem with partners who were Liberian professionals, including Mr. Ernest Smith, who many of you have studied with. And we made sure that he looked over the questions to make sure that he felt that they were culturally sensitive and made sense to the average Liberian citizen. We then tested them, and this is called pilot testing. Now, we've talked about this. You must pilot test your tools before you actually go out and ask them. Keep the recording unobtrusive. So if you're going to actually record something, for example, with your cell phone, which is a wonderful mechanism, you can open it up easily, turn on the recorder, you go to picture, you go to video, which Miss Alexis is showing, and it says video and you hit record, you want to leave it where it's available and people can see that you're actually making a recording. But you don't want to be holding it up to her face and saying, hey, what are you doing? So try to keep it unobtrusive. Use simple, clean language. For example, in Liberia, when I would ask students or women about their sexual history, we would first say, are you married or have you been married? Or have you had a man? We didn't say things that Americans might use. We used language that was very clear. As well, we found that you have to be very careful with the language you use. For example, as you remember, I would ask people when they lost their virginity. And in America, that is a very clear statement. And maybe to some Liberians, especially those who are well educated, saying things like, when did you lose your virginity makes sense. But it's not colloquial. It doesn't use language that normal Liberians would use in conversation. And so we learned from our team and our colleagues that we should say things like, when did you get into life? And that is actually a normal statement. And people would smile, they were happy that we were speaking the way they speak, and it made them very much understand what we were trying to ask. 6, phrase questions positively. I often was measuring child sexual abuse, but I never asked people, have you been abused? I would ask questions more positively. Have you been engaged in a sexual relationship? Was that relationship good or was that relationship bad? And it was more positive. It was more friendly and inviting, and it didn't turn people off negatively. And again, this was tested in collaboration with local partners who could help inform me, an outsider, how I should be asking these questions. So if you're a man who's going to be interviewing women, it may be very important that you run your questions by women who are similar to the women you'll be interviewing to see if they agree or disagree with the way that you're phrasing your questions. Keep the questions in the interview short. The general rule is try not to go beyond 10 questions for open interviews. Really, if you can keep it to 5 to 7, that's the best general rule. And you really need to value people's time. People really can only talk for about 15 to 45 minutes before they get very tired or they start to get distracted because they have other things to do. Save controversial questions for the end. So if you're going to ask people's opinions, for example, on politics, is the current president's administration doing well or are they doing poorly? Questions like that may get people heated. You maybe want to wait till the end when you have a better rapport or a better relationship with them. And then 2, interviews can go wrong. So always remember to manage the situation. If somebody seems that they don't want to be interviewed, you should do the ethically appropriate thing, which is stop the interview immediately, remind them about the informed consent procedure, that they can drop out, they don't have to participate, it's not mandatory. And if they really seem to feel uncomfortable, maybe provide them that reminder that they don't need to participate. Although you want to get your data, making people feel comfortable and ensuring that they don't feel pressured is much more important than data. So for example, if I was asking Alexis, and we will have Alexis pretend to be a Liberian woman, hello ma.
Hey, how are you, Maggie?
I am fine, thank you. My sister, could you tell me about your current husband?
Oh, I don't know.
What do you mean you don't know? Do you have a current husband?
I do.
Is he a good man or a bad man?
I don't know if I should be talking to you about this.
Oh, I'm sorry. Do you not feel comfortable speaking to me?
No.
I apologize. Then let us end this interview, and I appreciate your patience with me. Thank you, ma'am. So, for example, If she's refusing to answer or she's making sounds, which we all know many people in Liberia make, or we know they probably are not feeling very comfortable. If they're verbally saying they don't want to participate, don't let them and don't force them. And even if they're making sounds or looking shy, respect them and try to make sure that you're doing the ethically appropriate thing. It is good to make sure you have a recording when interviewing and later transcribe your notes. Don't sit there in front of someone taking notes of what they say. Record them and then come back later and transcribe them. Take notes on your opinions and the feelings of how you think the interview went. Many of my people actually did that on their survey. They would write notes if they thought somebody was maybe not being truly honest, or if they had questions of whether the person understood, and it really helped me understand how that interview went. Also, use 5 to 7 questions that are open-ended with no one correct answer. So again, don't phrase things that only provide one answer. Do you like my class? That's an open-ended, but still it's kind of puts a person in a bad position. You can ask a question more broadly. What do you think of the class? More neutral. And be respectful of the opinions and feelings of your interviewee. This is most important. And don't ask leading questions. Always try to remain neutral. All right. Thank you again for joining us here. We will have a third video, and please watch that one.